It's about time now. We mark today, the 25th of March, the International Day of Remembrance of the victims of slavery and the transatlantic slave trade. Now, this offers us an opportunity to honor and remember those who suffered and died at the hands of the brutal slavery system. Now, the International Day also aims to raise awareness about the dangers of racism and prejudice today. Now, today we remember the 15 million Africans that were forcibly removed from their homelands. These people were subjected to heinous cruelty and robbed of their dignity, freedom, and identities. And we're going to be talking about that today, as well as remembering them, honoring them as well, right here on the Africa Daily Show. So should you. While we're discussing, you can also share your thoughts with us on Facebook, Africa Global Radio.
I love Africa Global Radio.
Okay, let me welcome my colleagues. Let me start with the man Hafiz. Gunu Hafiz, Kaula.
Alafi.
Alafi, yeah? Nice. Today is a very important day as we will be, reflecting, on our forefathers, people who were forcibly against their rights, against their will, taken to a different continent, a different land, and everything, and not just a place where they would more like call it another home or a second home, but a place that they would go to be subjected, to hard labor and all sorts of inhumane, what do you call it, punishment and everything. And I think that is something that we today we really frown upon, and we pray that such a thing never comes back to existence anymore. Hafiz.
Thank you very much, Barry. Yes, today marks the International Day of Remembrance of the victims of slavery in the
Right.
transatlantic slave trade.
Mm.
And it's a day, like you rightly mentioned, we put on the spotlights
Mm.
issues of slavery
Right.
and what it means for Africa
Mm.
going forward
Mhm.
and what it means for our development, basically.
Absolutely.
Now, sometimes I've joined certain platforms on social media, and
Mm.
there are times you chance on certain the dark parts, I would say,
Mm.
where you have people question why we tend to talk about slavery
Mm.
at every turn. I was like, look, it's not something we take delight in,
In
but
talking about. Mm-hmm.
it's a conversation we need to have. It's one of those uncomfortable
Mm-hmm.
conversations that
Mm-hmm.
you need to bring up every
Mm-hmm.
time now and again, because it's from the past you learn not to repeat the
The
mistakes you
mistakes
made
in the
in the
future.
future.
Absolutely.
And so, this whole idea of constantly telling us that it's something that we talk about. We're going to talk about it because it's not something we are going to stop talking about just to accommodate your comfort.
Mm-hmm.
It's something we are going to keep talking about until we have people listening. Now, for me, when this whole thing happens, usually the more appropriate response is by an African Haitian writer I chanced on, and called Baron Devasti. Now, when someone asks you why it's something that we keep talking about, now this is a more appropriate response. Here it goes. It says the enemies of Africa wish to persuade the world that 5 out of the 6,000 years that the world has existed, Africa has always been sunk in barbarism, and that ignorance is essential to the nature of her inhabitants. Have they forgotten that Africa was a cradle of the arts and sciences? If they pretend to forget this, it becomes our duty to remind them of it. Now, this is something, definitely a call to action, something that we need to 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 have imprinted in our memory as to what exactly we need to do to drive home this conversation.
Right.
Now, of course, when you talk about transatlantic slave trade,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people think it's just something that, just a simple issue of having slaves being transported
Transported, yeah.
to another world. And
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't that simple.
Mm.
A lot happened before the journeys,
Yeah.
a lot happened during the journeys, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot happened
After
after.
the journey.
So
Right.
it wasn't just something that happened one-off thing, and
Mm-hmm.
it was
Yeah.
just it. Now, in my readings, I came across something called the Zong massacre.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many people have heard it.
Mm.
Now, it's just simple. Hopefully, when I just started, I'm
Mm.
hoping that for those interested
Mm.
in that, would actually do a little bit more reading
Really
on
on
the
that.
subject.
Mm.
Now,
Mm.
the Zong massacre happened in 1781.
Okay.
Now, it was a
Where did
time,
it happen?
it was on a ship,
Oh,
actually.
okay. Okay.
Now, it happened in 1781.
Right.
Now, what happened was that 470 slaves
Mm.
were being transported to, you know, the other war.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And during this time, because slavery was so lucrative,
Mm.
a lot of the captains on the ship would usually take more than their ships could take. So they usually took more than the number.
Okay.
Now, what happened was that, of course, you have diseases and whatever.
Some would die of
At some
hunger
point,
and what have
some
you.
would die
Yeah.
of hunger and
Mm.
everything.
Mm.
At some point, now, as they were sailing, at some point, they got to periods where there were little to no winds, and so the Zong, which was the ship that was
Okay.
called the
The
Zong,
zone,
yes,
right.
sailed into an area in the mid-Atlantic known as the doldrums.
Okay.
Now, when they got there, of course, people kept dying. 17 crew members died.
Mm.
50 slaves had died out of the 400 plus slaves
Right.
they had.
Mm.
And they came up with a plan. The plan was what? Simply push out some of the slaves out there, dump them into the river. So they ended up, those that were actually dying, that were sick, 132 slaves were simply disposed of.
So
And you know why they did it? It was
Di-
for a simple reason, to claim insurance. That was it.
to claim insurance.
So when you talk about some of these things, it
So
just
you have
brings
to
up,
murder someone, push someone.
because all
Oh
the
my
slaves were to them was cargo.
Yeah. You're
That's
just
all
a
they were
good.
to them. Exactly. So they just wanted to cut their losses. That's what they're doing. So, but then to get a more detailed understanding of what
Yeah.
the Zong massacre was
Mhm.
all about, just
You
look
can
it
you
up.
can make time
Yes,
to read
and,
more
and
on
read
it.
up on it.
Right.
And
Right.
so some of these things happen. It wasn't just something that happened one off.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that has continued to live with us. And you know, and to this day we have statues of all these personalities
Oh.
of people that orchestrated some of these things still in some of these
Erected. Yeah. Not until even the George Floyd
Floyd
issue that
incident.
actually saw
We saw
the
everything
pulling
happening.
down
The
of some
pulling
of
down
these
some of this
ones. Yeah.
in
Mm-hmm.
Belgium they still have the statue of King Leopold II. Now this is a man that
The guy, the guy, the Belgian king, yeah, that
Yeah.
guy, eh? No, let me just.
close to
Yeah.
10 million Africans.
I mean, the first thing I can think about him is the long sleeve or the short sleeve. Come
And,
on,
and speaking of that long sleeve or the
Charlie,
short
Charlie.
sleeve, there's this
There's a whole lot, man.
picture I chanced on by this photographer Alice Seeley Harris.
Mm.
Now, it's actually a part of her book titled "Don't Call Me Lady: The Journey of Lady Alice Seeley Harris,"
Right.
and it pictures a man that is distraught and looking at what looks like limbs.
Mm-hmm.
And according to her narration, this is a man called Nsala. Yes, and he's staring at the limbs of his 5-year-old daughter that was cut. And you know his crime? His crime was simply the fact that he didn't meet his rubber quota for the day.
So the daughter had to suffer the consequence
They killed his 5-year-old daughter, went on to kill the wife, the mother of the little girl.
again.
Yes. And that wasn't enough. They cannibalized both. So these are all things that
When you reflect and think about
you
it,
think about. It's just it
the
just
anger
gnaws at
keeps,
your soul.
Yeah.
Yes, and so
yeah.
that's why we get more angry when someone says, "Okay, stop talking about it." No, we're not going to stop talking about it. If it makes you uncomfortable,
You need to remember some of these things to know where you're going and how you want to go about things this time.
if
Yeah.
you can't stand the heat, leave the kitchen.
Right, exactly. Thank you very much for that final remarks. If you just cannot stand the heat, please make way. The show was Africa Daily on Africa Global Radio, and today's International Day of Remembrance of the Victims of Slavery and the Transatlantic Slave Trade. And it's a day that every African being on the continent or in the diaspora would want to reflect and go back and, of course, pay homage to our forefathers, our ancestors who've actually lost their lives through this inhumane, period that subjected this treatment they were subjected to back in the days. Let me go to Epi and hear what she has to say on this particular day. Epi,
Very.
not a good day, yeah? yeah. I mean, for you to transport, human beings, and if your ship cannot take that a number of individuals, why don't you take the one that you get? So if you
It's
go there,
about
and that's
making profits. It's about making
so you get
profits.
to the middle and you realize that maybe you are short of food, and you count the number of people on board. Like, you know what? Come on, Charlie. Epi, let's go.
Where is this world?
No, like I'm like it really touched me,
No, they do. I think that there are a lot more of such atrocities that have not been documented.
Oh yeah,
Some have
yeah,
not been.
I believe
Some
so.
of the nations responsible for some of these atrocities have actually refused to release documents regarding some of these incidences that took place, although they're really fully aware of that. And I think, I mean, slavery, it wasn't even something we're supposed to have from the beginning. Something that started, something that carried on and affected generations till today. We see treatment of African Americans, and we know where it all stems from. And I think
Till
one
date,
of
yes.
oh yeah, till
Yes,
date,
yes, till date.
till date. I mean, it's something that happens, and we've been shouting Black Lives Matter. Is not today. One thing I think it's also like a similar massacre, but this doesn't have to do with water. This has to do with land, and I'm talking about the Mau Mau. Some people call it the Mau Mau uprising or the massacre. This actually took place in Kenya,
Okay.
where you actually had British officials clubbing a number of men to death because they didn't
Because-
agree with how they were being treated. They literally kept these people in a fence. It was like a detention camp. And they were treating them, well, slaves per se. Feeding, food, everything was not in the right order. And when these men decided that, no, I mean, we can't go on like this. We need to speak up. We need to let them know that what's happening is not something we can stand. They were actually clubbed to death.
In our homeland. That's the part like I still try to wrap my head around. You come into my place
My neck of the woods.
exactly, and you God. Anyway, happy wrap up.
So I think it's not today, you see, but I believe the mentality, the thought that you feel you can demean, you have power over somebody, you can control and decide, like you thinking you have to tell somebody what they have to do, how they should live their lives, and if
Okay.
they're not doing how you want them to, and let's not forget that with all of this, they're doing it to their advantage. The labor,
Oh, yeah.
the work, everything is going to them.
Yeah.
The profit goes to them, not to us, not to the people. The lack of acknowledgement, not even regarding somebody as a fellow human being itself, is not something we should have in the first place. And yes, as Hafiz said, we're not keeping quiet. We're not shutting up. Nobody's going to shut up about this. We're going to keep saying this. And for those, recently, I don't know if any of you have come across that trend, but recently we have a session of them that have this thing like, well, I wasn't in the time that it happened. I'm not responsible for it when it happened. I didn't play a part in it. So we should not be held responsible for it.
Yeah,
And
don't
we
blame-
shouldn't-
don't
yeah,
blame
don't blame
every
us and
European.
every time.
I
What
know.
is this?
But it's your
Right now-
forefathers that did committed these heinous crimes,
You see,
right?
and right now it's become something like a blanket with which they want to cover themselves. So
is
some
it-
people are
So I ask this. So maybe our listeners could also help us out. Maybe even right here with you guys. So is that back in the days? Maybe is it that we as Africans at that time we didn't understand what human rights was?
But back in the days, who was coming to tell you human rights?
I
Back in the
don't know,
days, people lived in harmony. They lived in unity.
But there were
And
laws.
somebody,
Remember,
yes,
there were
there were laws,
kingdoms
but we had
governed
kingdoms
by
and
our
everything.
own kind of laws,
Yes,
right?
and we were used to our own kind of people. But
Right.
someone comes and they look entirely different from you. And they step onto your land and they bring things you haven't seen before. They show you ways and means in which you can do things. Things you, in your mind, are things that can be done in a weird form of way.
Someone asked me this question.
Belittling your form, your
Yeah.
understanding, your wisdom, your knowledge. And in a way, like someone put in a song and said, they actually brought us the Bible and taught us to pray. We had the land and they had the Bible. When they finished teaching us how to pray, by the time we opened our eyes,
But
we
you
had the
see-
Bible,
but you
they had
see,
the land.
That's the thing. Anyway, we'll get back to that. Hafiz, you're about saying something
You see,
before I get to Marvin.
when you
Yeah.
talk about slavery and how it happened, you're asking if they didn't know human rights and everything. Look,
Yeah.
It's an interesting question. But look, it reminds me of the time when we're having a conversation here on, I think that was FGM.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Maud was asking, I think how it's done and
Mm-hmm.
why wouldn't girls just run or just protect
Yeah.
themselves? And I was telling her, look, it's something that is presented as an initiation, something beautiful.
Yeah.
They don't just come and
Very
grab-
glamorous.
Exactly. With slavery, they didn't just come guns blazing. No, They came as traders.
Yeah.
To trade.
It was
That's
a
all.
conscious effort. to
Exactly.
Just capture
It was
the minds of
systematic.
millions.
It wasn't
Gradually.
something they
Indigenous and
And
all.
education.
Exactly. So they came in all kinds of forms before it evolved into something that.
So what happened to
eventually-
the missionaries? I mean,
What missionaries?
if you're a missionary, you're here to preach goodwill. You know.
But you haven't seen some
Not-
of the letters?
The missionaries were part of the problem, and
Yeah.
you see, with the missionaries,
Yeah.
they were part of a bigger agenda. They were working on the minds. Now, here's a quote from John Clark, just on regarding that. Now, to
Right.
control a people, you must first control what they think about themselves and how they regard their history and culture. And when when your conqueror makes you ashamed of your culture and your history, he needs no prison walls and no chains to hold you.
So you have an
Exactly.
ulterior motive. So
we
you
had
present
African
to me-
religion; it was demonized. Today,
Yeah.
we even see it in movies.
Yeah, I
today.
mean, yeah, that's why they call the fetish priests.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, you also have a priest.
Everything is demonized. African sculpture, you put that in your room, someone's seeing it and it's like, hey, you're worshiping the devil.
I don't know what
So-
they're trying to do now, but I sometimes see publications of maybe this European country is returning monuments that they have actually taken, they've
Speaking-
stolen years,
Exactly.
eons ago.
Look.
There's this one they actually returning to the kingdom of Benin back in the days. To that,
Speaking of
they're
monuments,
trying to make amends there.
we've lost so much
Yeah.
to the pillaging and everything
Oh, yeah,
from-
yeah.
from the Western world.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, on this same platform, I told you how we have the Star of Africa diamond, which is still in the scepter of the Queen of England. So
We want to take Africa
and even a crown. So they actually
from Africa,
yes, the South Africa actually.
from South Africa.
Now, here.
Wow.
Let's even go back to Guinea. They gained independence from in October 2nd, 58 thereabouts. And when that happened, the French leader then, that was Charles de Gaulle, he put out a fake story about how French were about to be murdered. And because they had declared independence, and it was through actually a referendum, they got the vote.
Okay.
Before the French had 2 months to leave. And you know what they did? In that 2 months, they destroyed practically everything. They were like, we are not going to leave these guys anything. So they wanted to, basically, they should have nothing. They should start
The
from
French.
the ground up. Yes. So they destroyed, even to the light bulb, they unscrewed everything.
We thank them.
They destroyed everything.
We thank them.
And so with the monuments bits, yes, we've lost some of these things. But in the end, you realize that, I don't know if we have to adopt what the Chinese have done in recent times. Recently, there was a story about how Chinese billionaires actually were sponsoring thieves to steal back the artifacts. So,
Really?
yes.
I mean,
so
the Chinese way of
But
doing
don't-
things
I wouldn't put it-
is a peculiar issue. So anyway, you know how
Seriously,
China
those
is.
people-
what happened
is
in
as
Stockholm?
big,
The
is
other
big,
happened
so-
in Norway and everything.
Right.
Yeah, Stockholm, that's Sweden, right? Yes.
Yes, Stockholm, Sweden. Yeah.
And the other happened in Norway. So I mean, and when they traced it, they realized, well, there was actually a government. It was actually a government-backed something.
Ah.
Exactly.
Anyway,
So maybe
let me bring in Mami so she could also share her own thoughts right here today. Mami, we're remembering our forefathers.
Yeah.
Someone would say if they had left me by now, maybe my brother would have been Nas on the continent, or maybe 50 cents.
very unfortunate.
Maybe Oprah Winfrey or something. Very sad. Well, yeah.
So today we are remembering the 15 million men, women, and children
Right.
who were
Right.
brutalized under the slavery system that endured for more than 400 years.
Mm.
I mean, recently I was watching a documentary on GTV,
Okay.
right? And I think they were visiting one of the forts. I don't remember the name.
Right. Here in our base, Ghana.
Here in our base, Ghana.
Okay.
And she was showing the various, when you visit the castles and the forts, they tell you the
The
stories.
story behind
and then,
some of these
and then,
places.
and then I saw some of the rooms, and then it's like every time you go there and they tell you, it brings tears to your eyes.
Look, there's some kind of feeling when you,
You never get
visit
used to it.
these.
It's not
no,
something
you,
get-
you never
it's
get
always a new
used to
place.
it.
Yeah, and I don't know, but a friend of mine will go like, Barry, I feel when you get inside, there are people touching you.
It's like there
They
are
are-
spirits
They are
in
they
there.
are, they are touching you, looking out for help. Like they are reaching out to you to
It's like-
to help.
Wait,
It's like the
especially
place
the
is
gate of
heavy.
no
Feel-
return.
The
Yes.
place is heavy,
Yes,
very
you-
heavy.
Like when you leave the room, you realize that no, I've left a certain. It's like a magnetic field kind of feel.
It's just, I mean, you watch those things and you're thinking, how did this happen? How do you leave your country, come to another man's country, and then say, "Oh, I'm taking you back to my country, but I'm taking you back as a slave."
Well,
And then you treat him.
is the psychological slave
It's like how
that
whatever puts that idea in your mind. How do you sit around a table and say, "Oh, this is Africa.
Yeah.
You guys will go to the
and they
east.
own territories.
We will go
They'll
to the
own this
west,
place,
and
just
then
like that.
treat humans like animals."
Yeah, by the order of the Queen, you know. There's this
That
movie
Queen's
in
like,
Albania.
"Well,
It says
Lasham."
heritage something something.
Heritage Ghana, yeah, and
By the order of the
Timothy,
Queen, I order you to go back.
Yeah,
You order
and-
who?
Timothy is doing this thing
I
where
watched
they're
that movie,
showing
yeah.
old things, like because of
If
the
you
Ghana
see
man.
I don't know if it's a hat or a modern day Kuraba. Like I was.
You know, it's like
no way.
yeah, but I mean that is a situation we hope the world never goes back to.
But
And in as much as we've come a long way from that, I feel like modern day slavery is still
that's what I'm about to
happening.
talk about. Fast forward, what is it looking like? Kwame Nkrumah would say what? New colonialism. We're in it.
No, it's not even about them colonizing us. I'm
Uh-huh.
talking about modern day slavery where you find blacks. I mean, I don't
think
know
there
if
was
any
a
of you
time
have seen it, but
we heard
there used to
about
be a trend on Twitter about slavery that was
humans.
happening in Libya.
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
Oh, yeah.
I heard about that. I mean,
Oh,
it's
no,
not even,
I've
at the end of the day, it's about exploiting you.
And even moving away from that, I mean, we've heard stories where stepmothers are making their stepchildren do so many things.
Look, there's a lot
Where
of-
people go to the villages, get these young kids, put them in a trawler and say, "Oh, you're the fisherman for today. Today, go to sea and fish."
So what's the difference now? Like we're actually engaged in some form of these activities, and we feel it's not because we are of the same kind. That kind of thing.
The world just has to do better.
has
But
to do
then
better.
the theme for this year's celebration is ending slavery's legacy of racism,
Right.
a global imperative for justice. And this is reflecting the global movement to end injustices that are rooted in the slave trade
Okay.
and teaching history so as to acknowledge slavery's impact on today's world and spur action to address its long-lasting effects. I mean, having talked about how we look at the things happening in America and how it's all embedded in slavery. So that is what this theme is seeking to address.
We talk about concrete jungles in New York and all of that. Trust me, our people actually did the hard work, the hard labor to build all of these fancy places we see on TV. But then let me
Now,
go. Yeah.
a quick one. I just Hafiz was reading something, but I just wanted. I saw this thing some time ago.
Okay.
The letter from King Leopold II of Belgium to colonial missionaries in
He's
the
still
year
right.
1883.
Oh, I thought he has letters that is pending.
That man,
there.
that man.
Now, this is what he says: Reverends, fathers, and dear compatriots, the tax that is given to fulfill is very delicate and requires much tact. You will go certainly to evangelize, but your evangelization must inspire above all Belgium interest. Now, your principal objective in our mission in the Congo is never to teach the niggers to know God.
Okay.
This
hold on
they
to that.
know
the
already.
N-word.
Now, the N word here is what they used to call us. I'm just reading directly from the letter.
Yeah,
That's what they used to call a black man then. They know God already. They speak and submit to a Mungu, one in Zami,
Yeah,
one in
Mungu.
Zakumba. And what else I don't know. They know they know that to kill, to sleep with someone else's wife, to lie and to insult is
That's
bad.
Rhyme, yeah.
They know. Have courage to admit it, but you're not going to teach them what they know already. Your essential role is to facilitate the task of administrators and industrials, which means you will go to interpret the gospel in the way it will be the best to protect your interest in that part of the world.
I don't blame some people who actually don't believe in religion. But anyway, it
You
happens,
see,
yeah.
speaking of this religion thing, is the reason we are seeing the confusion we are seeing in northern Nigeria till date.
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boko
He'll
Haram
kill
and
you, he'll
whatnot.
commit murder, and
Because-
justify
look,
it.
Because you see, with Boko Haram,
Yeah.
and even the start of the Zongos,
the Zongo communities
Zongo
we have,
community.
right.
It started with the missionaries. Before they came, Nigeria had a system that was running very well, especially the
The
northern
Sharia
part.
law thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The likes of Usman Danfodian and
Oh,
co.
yeah. Oh,
They had
yeah.
a system that was going on very well until the British came in and disrupted the system. Okay, and to them they had an Islamic system, and so that's why when the missionaries came, they didn't give them a free access
resisted,
to
yeah.
run around and preach their religion.
Right.
They gave them a space to do that, to propagate the gospel, they called it. And so that was where the Zongo started.
Okay.
Yes, so the Zongo just simply means a stranger's quarters.
Okay.
That's where it started. So that was where the missionaries were. Unlike the southern part of it, where they were allowed to roam around
Yeah.
and do whatever it is they wanted to do. In the northern sector of it, that
It wasn't the case.
it wasn't the case. So it was a long game. Anyway.
Wow. You preach good, and then you have your embedded motives. But anyway, we are running out of time, so we can just wrap it up with our final takes right here. And people want to go, so we can just move on to.
I think I'd say that despite whether religion, whether economic, whether education, despite the means, I think you have no right whatsoever to devalue, to degrade, to look down upon an individual, a fellow person like you.
Right.
It doesn't matter how you think or how you see yourself. Now, it is not in your place to determine
Who
whether
lives
somebody
and who
is
even
worth
dies.
or whether somebody is not worth. The respect we give to ourselves, we should learn to give to other people. Precisely the way they treated us, if they were treated like that. And I think one fact we all know that probably they don't like to admit, everything they have, everything they claim to and hold on to, everything that makes them was actually done, built, labored for by a black man.
Right. Thank you very much, Epi. And let me go to Mommy so we can move forward.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, we're always talking about how white people came down, dehumanized the black race, took people in, packed them like sardines, treated them as animals. But you're in your own country, you're doing that to your fellow men. You're in your own country, you're selling kids, you're selling grown-ups, you're selling women to other people
Shame on you.
to be sold into slavery, to be used for prostitution and all sorts of social vices.
Yeah.
So it's like, while we are remembering this day, we should look at our actions. Am I treating somebody as a slave? Are my actions making people feel like my forefathers felt then? Then you can answer and then do better.
Yeah,
The world needs to do better for humans.
That is very true. That is very true. Because sometimes, in as much as we talk about, the Europeans, the Westerners coming
But
over,
yes, this is where we find ourselves doing it to ourselves.
And that brings the conversation to the table. Because in as much as we see them, we see these Europeans and the Caucasians and what we call like, it is, you remind me of the people who did this. But you see, even within them, there are people who are very conscious about Africa, who feel, no, I mean...
this shouldn't have happened.
Exactly, you get it. So, at the same time, that conversation is also happening here. You see a fellow black man treating the fellow black man as if he's not a human being. I mean, we saw this orphanage where the guy actually made one of the kids in there eat, what do you call it, stew.
Yeah, that is one of those Anas exposés. I watched that. I mean,
so what would you call that?
So how different are you from the slave masters that came in and took people to?
So please,
to the Americans and to the Caribbean.
Another part of it, I think we haven't even looked at is, when Africans in the diaspora and Africans here take a go at each other.
Well, if we start that conversation,
we won't finish.
We'll end up in the.
No, I'm not going anywhere with it. I'm just saying it's very unfortunate. I mean, if there's anything, we should be encouraging togetherness. But there's this whole idea of this superiority complex going on one side, and I just feel it's unfortunate, and it's one of the unfortunate byproducts.
Well, I think we can actually establish a conversation around that sometime with our fellow diasporans, our brothers and sisters in the diaspora, and maybe express these feelings, the sentiments that one would feel. Because a lot of people, I know some people feel, they are the same thing. They come and they feel like they are the Jesus Christ and they are here to save you.
A lot of the time, the argument from that part of the world is that, okay, I mean, we did this to their forefathers. We sold them out.
Okay.
There's this narrative that, okay, those that were sold into slavery were actually criminals and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's our fault.
Exactly. So those on that side of the world tend to say it's our fault for doing that.
Everybody just has the opportunity
but it's one of those lies that has been
circulating for a while.
Yes. But it's another conversation
for another time. Right. Thank you very much, guys.